In every period of Jewish history, every generation has had a spokesman, someone who has represented the voice of Judaism at that time. The Tannites had Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the Rishonim had Maimonides, the Achonim had the Vilna Gaon, 19th century Jews had Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, and we have Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sacks.
At the actual inauguration, my biggest feeling was a sense of thanksgiving that my late father, Oliver Shalom, was able to be there. You know, he was in his 80s, he'd gone through 4 very difficult hip operations. He could only walk with sticks, but he managed to climb those stairs of the St. John's Wood Shul and open the Ark at my induction as Chief Rabbi. And I don't think any of us really have any higher honor than to be able to give nachas to your parents. So for me, that chance of him being there was the thing I will cherish for the rest of my days. It was a huge privilege, as it was for my mum, Aleha Shalom, to be there when I got my knighthood and when I was introduced to the House of Lords. In the end, you give nachas to your parents, all the rest doesn't matter at all.
There has been no finer advocate for our community than the Chief Rabbi. He has this knack of getting a message across in a way that very few can, and he does it with power, he does it with force, and he does it with feeling.
I was delighted when the Chief laid the foundation stone, and when in fact he actually taught the Mayor of London how to blow a shofar, which I think is a memorable occasion for everybody concerned.
No, you don't have to be Jewish.
Nobody could have represented the British people with more intellectual gravity, more kindness, and more generosity of spirit than Jonathan Sacks.
"20-odd years ago, when he called for the famous message, will we have Jewish grandchildren? I think it woke the community, it shook the community, and on the back of that, on the school side of things, Jewish schooling began to become far more popular, with of course the phenomenal positive results that followed. So we are ever so grateful to the Chief Rabbi, and we hope that the next many, many, many years he will go mechail el chayil in his teaching of Torah, learning, inspiration, leadership. Everything he's given us so far will simply grow and become ever greater, so that we, the community in Manchester and I guess in the whole of England, will be the greatest beneficiary of this exceptional person, the Chief Rabbi Lord Sacks.
As Jews, because we're so wrapped up in our own community, we can sometimes underestimate the impact that Jonathan Sacks has had outside the community on people who aren't Jewish, and how they can look to him as a moral voice on all sorts of questions that are very difficult to answer. Why do natural disasters happen? You know, if you're a journalist, I worked as comment editor of the Times for a long time, and you're looking for someone to comment on those things, it's very difficult to find someone who can say something meaningful. You know, apart from like tsunamis, I'm against them. But Jonathan Sacks can find meaning in those kind of events. He understands the moral fabric of the country. He has draws on Jewish learning, but also has a sensibility about how non-Jews might think about the situation, and can extend the lessons and learnings and traditions of the Jewish faith to those people and let them share in it.
This is the seat in which Jonathan invariably sits to do his thought for the day, and I sit on the other side of the table there. And he is, and I don't say this of all the contributors to Thought for the Day, but he is one of those contributors to whom you listen when you're sitting in the studio. You've got other things to think about, you're busy, you've got the next interview coming up, but it is very difficult to sit and listen to Jonathan talking and not pay attention. And that's for a number of reasons, partly because he has something to say, partly because of the patent sincerity with which he says it, but also because there's a sort of touch of humour lurking away there as well. There's that touch of self-deprecation. There's none of the arrogance. There's none of that, at least this isn't what I get from him, there's none of that, oh well look, I know God. And you know what God thinks? In fact, he told me just the other day. You don't get that from Jonathan. You do get a sense of humility. You do get the sense that he is profoundly religious, and I use the word profoundly deliberately. And you get the sense, I have to say, that he's a good man.
Last year, when the Chief Rabbi was in conversation with Ron Heifetz, who I know is a huge fan of his, and they were in conversation at the 20th anniversary of the Adam Science Foundation, and the Chief Rabbi was so funny. He kept everybody laughing. Everything he said was hysterical. He was talking about leadership, but in such a self-deprecating way that the whole audience was rolling around laughing.
I will remember the occasion, was it 2.5 years ago or so, when Pope Benedict XVI came to Britain, and I was asked to welcome him on behalf of all the non-Christian faiths. And this was Erev Yom Kippur, this was the day of Kol Nidre, and just hours before Kol Nidre, and there was the Pope, dressed entirely in white, with a white yarmulke and a white robe, looking for all the world as if it were a kittel, as if we were a chazan just about to daven Kol Nidre. And I will claim my reward in heaven for not saying Good Yontiv Pontiff. There was a memorable occasion just at the very beginning when I'd been appointed but not yet taken up office as Chief Rabbi, and George Carey had been appointed but not yet taken up office as Archbishop of Canterbury, and somebody discovered we were both manic Arsenal supporters and came to both of us and said, would you like your first ecumenical gathering to be in, as it was then, Highbury Stadium? Well, I said, wonderful. The Archbishop of Canterbury said, Voda Machaya, and so it happened. We came together. That night, they went down to their worst home defeat in 63 years. They lost 6-2 at home to Manchester United. The next day, a newspaper, a national newspaper in Britain, ran the story which said, if the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Chief Rabbi between them could not bring about a win for Arsenal, does this not finally prove that God does not exist? The next day I delivered my answer, which was quite simple. No, it proves that God exists. It's just that he supports Manchester United.
I remember the manager saying to us, it's always lovely to have the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Chief Rabbi here, but if we're going to play that badly when you come, please don't come too often.
I was 18 years old, lonely, living in Jerusalem, and I write an email to the Chief Rabbi, who doesn't know me from Adam. So I received a long reply from the Chief Rabbi that really touched me and also inspired me to keep going. And so he's really featured for me in my own personal life as a demut, an image, an example, an exemplar of the sort of Jew that I could strive to be.
The thing that sticks in my mind with the Chief Rabbi was a meeting I had with him where we were talking about the role that Jewish care plays in the community. He described the sort of synagogal bodies working in one direction and the sort of cross-communal organisations like Jewish Care working in another direction, and that they interlock in a sort of way that a piece of cloth comes together, and that's what binds and gives the community its strength. And it was a really very, very powerful imagery to me of just how what makes the Jewish community and our community so special.
Tonight I have recalled how 20 years ago I was first inspired by the Chief Rabbi through Jewish Continuity. I was very privileged to learn with him once a month on an early Sunday morning, and that was one of the highlights actually of my month. And in those 20 years, I think he has inspired the community through education, particularly through things like schooling, and actually social justice.
He helped us rebuild this place, and it's now with over 500 students coming every week and programs all over the community, and it's guided by his thought. When people say, what's the ideology of LSJS? I say it's in the great traditions and the thought of our Chief Rabbi Sachs. Everybody knows what that means. Nothing excites him more than seeing young people engage in their Judaism, asking questions and thinking and challenging him. I love watching him do Q&A, and the harder the question, the better.
As someone who's heard the Chief Rabbi speak in numerous different kind of situations before, that was probably the most personal to me. I think I've heard him speak at my school, at my university, and other places when it was probably a more single-minded audience. And I think it's really great that with such a diverse audience, with so many different people, and I mean that's the whole point of this seminar, we've all different youth movements coming together with different opinions and different ideologies. And I think it was really great how the Chief Rabbi could make it seem as if he was speaking personally to me.
I'm a liberal Jew. I belong to a liberal Jewish community. And Jonathan Sachs's great achievement is that without abandoning his own orthodoxy, without really making concessions to my liberal Judaism actually, he's succeeded in being relevant to people like me, despite the fact that we have many disagreements theologically and politically. And that I think is his great achievement. I've never felt, despite the fact that he's the Chief Rabbi of the United Synagogue, that he's somebody I can't relate to as a liberal Jew.
I think when he stands up and represents us, we feel that we have a leader representing us who can command an enormous amount of respect. And that in itself has changed the community in a very, very important way.
He is a great communicator. If Jews in this country felt they needed to get their message across, they could not have gone to a better man than Jonathan. At that, I think he's been brilliant.
I acquired this wonderful friend. His name is Anthony Spitz. And Anthony Spitz owns a shop called New and Lingwood, the official outfitters of Eton, believe it or not, and it is a shop in Jermyn Street. Now, all my, being the son of a schmutter dealer in Commercial Road, my biggest dream in life was to own a Jermyn Street shirt, and lo and behold, he sends me the guy who owns the shop. So a few years ago, I discovered it. He said, come before Rosh Hashanah and I will be proud to present you with some shirts. So I did. And my arms are quite short. So he measured my arm length and shortened them 2.5 inches, which was great. I mean, this was gewaldig, until it came to my first sermon. I flung my arms out and nearly strangled myself. He had not built in room for arm movement. It was quite good. If you want to strangle a rabbi, that's how you do it. Sorry. When you've been captain of the team for 22 years, you begin to realize the time has come for the team to have a new captain. 22 years from now, we should all live so long. I would hope to have achieved 3 things. Number 1, to have inspired some people to go and be leaders in the Jewish world, whether as rabbis, educators, or lay leaders. Number 2, I would hope to have written some books that answered some of the burning questions Jews have about Judaism. And number 3, I hope to have shown that this incredible new medium of global communication, the internet, can be used in new and exciting ways to make Judaism live in the minds and hearts of young Jews. Those are my 3 big ambitions, and to achieve any of them would be sufficient.